Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Theology Central podcast. It is Thursday, October the 1st, 2020. It is currently 2:49 p.m. Central Time, and once again, I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church located here in Ovalo, Texas. Now, with all of that out of the way, this afternoon, I have other things I want to do, but I've kind of stumbled on a rabbit trail, right? Okay. This happens sometimes. It's probably happened to you. You're thinking about one thing and the next thing you know, a different train of thought, and you start chasing this rabbit down a rabbit trail and you don't know where it's going to go. But I hope that my journey down this rabbit trail today, this afternoon, will be beneficial to all of you. What we're kind of doing right now is we're looking. It's October the 1st. Before we know it's going to be 2021. And I'm kind of looking to the future and going, okay, what's going to happen when we get there? And so in the last episode, we talked about the future of free speech. What is free speech going to look like when we get into 2021? And we listened to a commentary where they give a lot of statistics, this big study they did on college campuses. And you know, it's a little disturbing that a lot of college-age students are kind of not really for the idea of free speech. So it raises lots of questions of where we're going to go. And there was lots of different layers to that discussion. I'm not going to go back and repeat everything I said, but I tried to be as fair with the subject as I could and offered up the different. I'm not one to say, hey, here's the subject and it's black and white. A lot of times there's lots of different layers and you have to work your way through those different layers and try to figure those out. And so that's what I've tried to do. And I'm saying all of that because we've got a subject here where the same thing, we got a lot of issues here to try to work through, and we got to try to be very fair and very precise here. So this may turn into really looking. This entire episode may turn into looking at a law that was passed in California that's going to be mentioned in a commentary that I'm going to play, and actually trying to understand what the law did and what it didn't do, so that we can try to come to a correct understanding on this. But let's set it up this way. As we look to 2021, all right? So we've talked about what could 2021 look like in regards to free speech. What could 2021 look like as it relates to the subject of pedophilia? All right. Now, that's obviously controversial. And that obviously could raise some questions. It obviously means that we're going to be talking about some things that you may not want your children to hear, so you may want to move them away. But the subject of pedophilia is obviously something that no one likes to talk about. It's a horrible thing. No one likes the thought, the idea of a child, a young person, being used sexually by an adult. No one likes that. We want that stopped. We want it condemned, and we want a society that condemns it outright. But here is an argument that has been talked about for a long time, and we have to and there's possibly a logical fallacy here. We'll talk about that in a minute. But let's try to build this. It has been stated for a long time that as morality changes as it relates to sexuality, that as these changes continue to happen, that ultimately we will find ourselves changing the normal morality that society typically has in regards to pedophilia, and it will be changed, and we'll start defending it and trying to allow it. That's been the concern. Now, obviously, there has been lots of changes in sexual morality throughout the years. All right, we see widespread acceptance of homosexuality as just being, you're heterosexual, you're homosexual, no difference, perfectly okay, and everyone can choose their form of sexuality. All right, and we've seen society embrace homosexuality as acceptable, embraced fornication, pornography. Adultery is still sometimes condemned. I don't know. I don't really know why. Probably because no one wants to be the one cheated on, so everyone still condemns adultery. There still seems to be a stigma against that. But the bottom line is morality in any society is subject to change, and we shouldn't be surprised by that because people change. And as society moves further and further away from Christianity, their morality in regards to things the Bible condemns is obviously going to change, and they're going to move away from the biblical condemnation of practices. The Bible gives certain restrictions to sexuality, that sex is to be done within the bonds of marriage between a man and a woman, period, the end. And society has said we reject that. So it's changed in regards to homosexuality, the whole LGBTQ, and all of the different things that have happened. Society has changed. Now, make it very clear. I am not one to try to tell society what to do. What I believe the church to do is we preach Christianity. We preach repentance and faith in Jesus Christ. We preach against sin, and we call those people to repent and believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and then adopt and strive to live the biblical model of sexual morality. People may fall short, but then they have to repent and then try to get back on the right path and walk the way Christ calls us to walk in regards to sexual morality. I'm not one by trying to shove a biblical morality down or try to force it upon those who do not accept Christianity, because all that does is just become an external law that doesn't change them internally, and ultimately they rebel against it. And society is going to determine what laws they want and don't want. Society changes, morality changes. The church, though, should not compromise. The church cannot change, all right? The church cannot change. That's the main thing. But this always happens. When society changes, the church changes. Look, society begins to change its views on homosexuality, and you got large denominations and lots of churches. I won't say a majority, but you still have lots of churches that have changed their views in regards to homosexuality, allowing homosexual ministers, blessing same-sex unions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The church always follows society. So the church, as sexual morality changes more and more in society, the key for Christians to watch out is what your church is doing, how your church is changing, what your church is saying. Is your church staying true to Scripture, or is it adopting the spirit of the age? That's what so when we talk about the future of sexual morality moving into society is going to move further and further away from biblical morality. The issue is how the church is going to continue to compromise on it. All right. And we could talk all day in regards to that. So this is the way the argument typically goes. As society moves further and further away from biblical morality, that ultimately, after they've now the society has embraced homosexuality, that the next step on the slippery slope will be justifying, protecting, accepting, and not condemning pedophilia. Now, if that is where we're headed, that is troubling. Not only for a society, but then again, we have to see how that plays out in the church. Now, we could talk about all of the... again, Christians have got to be very fair here. We love to condemn society. We love to condemn society about all kinds of issues, but please note, every time we start chunking rocks at the society for their sexual immorality, look at all the sexual immorality that happens inside the church. Look at all of the abuse scandal with, adults committing sexual acts against children, sinning against children, sexual sin, sexual acts committed with children. Look at how many scandals there have been within the church, not just the Catholic Church, in the Protestant church as well. Baptist churches, Southern Baptist churches, Independent Baptist churches. It's a societal epidemic. And we could ask ourselves, why has it become such a major issue in society of this happening? And we could talk teachers with students, all kinds of things have occurred. It's disturbing, it's troubling. So where are we headed? So when we talk about the slippery slope, let's just remember that slippery slope that we point to the society sliding down. The church is just as vulnerable to said slope. All right? So is that the next step on the slippery slope? The world has basically said homosexuality is okay. Are they going to ultimately say pedophilia is okay? Is that where we're headed? Now, let's just do a couple of things here. We have to at least address this. Slippery slope is listed as a logical fallacy in many publications. Basically, it goes like this. Slippery slope. You said that if we allow A to happen, then Z will eventually happen too. Therefore, A should not happen. This is the way the argument is made. You said that we should allow A to happen. well, then Z will eventually happen too. Therefore, A should not happen. That's the way logical or slippery slope thinking works. Now, the problem with the reasoning is that it avoids engaging with the issue at hand and instead shifts attention to extreme hypotheticals. Because no proof is presented to show that such extreme hypotheticals will in fact occur, this fallacy has the form of an appeal to emotion fallacy by leveraging fear. In effect, the argument at hand is unfairly tainted by unsubstantial conjecture. So this is a logical fallacy. Hey, if we allow A, Z is going to happen, and nobody wants Z, so it appeals as an emotional fallacy. It's appealing to emotion, which is a logical fallacy, because you can't appeal to emotion and remain logical and objective. It tries to use fear. It tries to use some extreme hypothetical. You have to give clear proof that A will lead to Z. Now, you may be right. Your prediction may be right, but you got to really deal with the issue at hand. Not just say the reason I'm against this issue is because where it will lead. That's a logical fallacy. And preachers commit that logical fallacy all the time. Church members commit that logical fallacy all the time. The news media commits that fallacy all the time. I've committed that fallacy a lot as well. All right. Hopefully not all the time. I'm at least aware that it's a fallacy. Hopefully I don't do it all the time, but we've all been guilty of it to some level. Here's an example that one article provides on this logical fallacy. Colin Closet asserts that if we allow same-sex couples to marry, then the next thing we know, we'll be allowing people to marry their parents, their cars, and even monkeys. And you heard some of that. Well, if you allow two guys to get married, well, then the next thing you know, a guy's going to be marrying a dog. I even heard that from pulpits before. Okay. Now, again, that's slippery slope. That's a logical fallacy. Now, what we're about to hear is going to kind of borrow from the whole slippery slope argument. And what we're getting ready to listen to is a commentary that I heard where they're talking about, hey, we're sliding down the slope towards pedophilia. That's where we're and so they're going to use the slippery slope idea, which again is a logical fallacy. Now, they may be right. So what we have to look for is we have to look for proof that that's where we're headed. We've got to look for proof. Now, I will argue that one of the things that we all have to address in the church, outside the church, everywhere is what is happening with all of the sexual abuse against children. I mean, the numbers are somewhat staggering, whether it's in the Catholic Church, just inside quote unquote Christendom. It's staggering. What is even going on in the world? And it's amazing how many people you talk to as adults will talk about how they were sexually abused, sexually assaulted by, a family member. How many females you talk to who they encountered something, and you're like, what is going on? A lot of it happened to when they were young. It's staggering how frequent it happens. I mean, this is like an epidemic. It's like a pandemic. The whole world should be like, wait, why is this happening? Why? Now we could speculate all day. We could say, well, the world has moved away. Some will argue, well, they moved away from biblical morality. Well, it's happened inside the church. It happened inside the church. The church supposedly maintains biblical morality. And you got to be careful with that. Sometimes say, well, the world, they're the ones messing up sexual morality. But look at all the problems inside the church just with pornography use. How many Christian young people engaged in fornication? Adultery. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Christians are not exempt from these issues. Sometimes we always make it like we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. No, sexual sin within society, sexual immorality within society always comes inside the church because we're all human beings and we're sinners. We're all sexual human beings, creatures as well. Paul had to look at what was happening at Corinth. Sexual immorality was prevalent in the city of Corinth, and it was also inside the church. So sometimes we're like, look at the world. Look, are we down a slippery slope towards pedophilia? Well, before we, again, blame the world, we got to look at what's going on inside the church. Now, what we're getting ready to hear is a commentary, and they're not going to look at towards what's going on in the church. They're going to look at what's happening in the world, and they're going to focus on two things, all right? And just listen to me, be careful. They're going to focus on the Netflix movie Cuties, which has received so much controversy. I haven't talked about it because I haven't watched it because I don't want to watch it. So I've tried to kind of stay out of it because it's like I'm not going to watch the movie. I mean, I don't know how bad it is. I don't know necessarily what's in it or not in it. But if it has anything that even just kind of gets close to pedophilia, I don't want anything. I don't want to get a million miles close to that. I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know. So I haven't watched it. And yeah, whatever. I no. So I've tried to be very careful, but Christians have started using this. And so this commentary is going to use the idea of cuties. We're on the slippery slope towards pedophilia. And they're going to talk about a law passed in California. Now, if you look on social media, a lot of people saying the law in California now basically allows pedophilia. And you're like, whoa. We're going to have to really think about this law. So I had to pull up some information about the law signed in California. And so so this is a slippery slope argument without really giving us any tangible proof that's where we're headed. Yeah, I don't know where society is going with their sexual morality. Again, what we have to focus on first and foremost is the church's response. Look at how the church used to handle the subject of divorce and remarriage in the past. Then society, divorce started running rampant. Divorce and remarriage was the most common thing in the world. Now divorce and remarriage is not only acceptable in most churches, not only is it acceptable, in some cases it's almost supported. They have here's a class for all those who've been recently divorced. And it's like, well, okay, we're having a class for divorced people so that they can meet other now divorced people so they can find a new spouse. Like, what are we doing now? Are we a dating program? What's going on here? So, but the church's views changed on that. See, we're very good at picking out the change in society without always seeing the change happening in the church. And then we can see the change in many churches in regards to homosexuality. And we can go on and on and on and on and on. The church is always changing, just like society is always changing. We're not exempt from it. All right. So they're getting ready to use this slippery slope idea. I don't know where society is going to go with their sexual morality. I mean, society is going to continue to change their views. I mean, look, the whole thing about gender, transgender, LGBTQ, the world has made a definitive, clear break from biblical morality when it comes to sexuality. And we're going to continue to move further and further away. Is pedophilia possible as saying, hey, that's acceptable? Well, if we're going to make that claim, we've got to offer some support. Let's listen to this commentary and you'll see what I mean. All right, here we go. Let's take this apart. You ready? Here we go.
When slopes are slippery, especially in the area of human sexuality, humans tend to slide all the way to the bottom. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. Each and every chapter of the sexual revolution has featured an updated version of the same old myth. Hey, don't worry, the kids will be fine. Sex with anyone anywhere, the kids will be fine. Separating marriage from procreation, the kids will be fine. No-fault divorce, the kids will be fine. Graphic sex education in schools beginning in kindergarten, the kids will be fine. Same-sex marriages, eliminating either a mom or a dad from the picture, the kids will be fine. Well, they weren't. They never have been. Growing up in families without married parents, their well-being sacrificed for the sake of adult happiness, these kids have been the primary victim of our sexual experimentations. To cover our tracks now, we've resorted to indoctrination. We attempt to convince them of other myths, such as the idea that biological sex and their physical bodies are just fully malleable things. Kids today literally are taught to be skeptical of how they are made. Well, the kids aren't fine. They've never been fine, not throughout the entire history of sexual redefinition. And I'm afraid, that the next chapter of this has just begun. Even before Netflix released Cuties, that French movie about an 11-year-old girl who joins a twerking dance group to escape her conservative Muslim family, it received widespread backlash. Many critics, including all of us here at the Colson Center, were horrified to think that a movie that featured pornographic footage of very young actresses would even be permitted to air. But it was. And even worse, once the director wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post attempting to explain her intentions, she and her film have been defended in mainstream media outlets such as the Washington Post and on NPR. She was warning us about the sexualization of children through online technology. We were scolded, even if in the process she sexualized actual children. The lead character, the one sexualized throughout the entire film, is played by an actual 11-year-old girl. At the risk of sounding like the old man who just yells, "Get off my lawn," to the enlightened minds at NPR, no 11-year-old girl should ever be sexualized for any reason. The defense of this film makes me think that perhaps we've entered some new territory. You see, each and every stage of the sexual revolution has progressed the same way. A morally questionable activity enters into our culture, not through any moral arguments, but through the imagination, typically entertainment or some form of artistic expression. I'm old enough to remember how controversial Beverly Hills 90210 was, as it skirted the edge of our cultural moral boundaries, depicting teenagers that were talking about sex but never actually having it. In the end, the characters mostly came down on the right side of the moral question, but not because of any appeal to a stable moral framework. No, the teens just, quote, weren't ready to take that step yet. Just a few years later, say on an episode of Friends, the teenager is having sex, this time with his teacher. And this time, it's funny. Before long, it's Glee, and the teens aren't just talking anymore. They're doing, and they're in central Indiana, not L.A. We could trace the history of homosexuality the same way, by the way, from the not that there's anything wrong with that days of Seinfeld to Will and Grace to Modern Family. At the end of Cuties, I'm told, the lead character leaves behind her twerking dance crew and returns to her conservative family. Her decision, of course, does not come from any moral framework, much less a condemnation of the pedophilia that the film both portrays and commits. The crisis is resolved through some weak notion of self-discovery, being true to yourself. This means that in the next Cuties, and there will be a next one, the ending will be different. Maybe her fundamentalist parents will learn to flex a little bit this time. Maybe in the one after that, she just doesn't go home at all. Before long, well, none of us are alarmed anymore by pornographic portrayals of children. You see, what happened with sexual promiscuity, adultery, homosexuality, and currently with transgenderism is happening with kids. We've already told them that they can determine their own sexual identities. At the same time, the only ground left for sexual morality in our culture is this very flimsy notion of consent. So is it really that much of a leap, really, from here to kids self-determining their sexual behavior? Just 2 weeks ago, California's governor signed a bill decriminalizing homosexual activity between adults and minors that are 14 and over, as long as there's less than a 10-year age gap between the two, and consent was given. Lawmakers said the bill was necessary for the equality of LGBT people because heterosexual sex between a minor and an adult has already been decriminalized along the same lines. Look, I hate to say it. The train of pedophilia has left the station. The kids will not be fine. For Breakpoint, I'm John Stonestreet.
Okay, so he's making his argument is we're on a slippery slope. And this is the way it works. Now, yes, I agree. This is the way it always works. There is always a slow move away. Here's the moral standard. Something comes along that kind of questions the moral standard, pushes at the edges of it. People get upset. People get mad. They want it boycott. They want it silenced, whatever. Everyone's, it's horrible. It's outrageous. And then 3 years later, 4 years later, 5 years later, something else comes out. It takes it even further. And in many cases, now the backlash against it is over. Well, why? Society changes. I mean, this is the way it works. Society changes. Morality changes within society. That's the way it is. The issue is, again, from the Christian perspective, is not worrying about where society is going. Making sure society's moral changes does not impact the church's view on said moral subject because our view comes from Scripture. But we have to realize it's changing. But he's arguing because that's the way it works, pedophilia is next. And the two things he offered up was Cuties, right? Hey, Cuties pushed this, and now the next, it's going to go further, and then boom, it's everywhere. And then the second thing he said, so there's Cuties, kind of trying to change our mind on the subject. And then he pointed to a law recently signed in California. All right. The California legislature passed Senate Bill 145. Senate Bill 145. I would challenge you, don't look at what people are saying about it. You need to go read it for yourself. I'm getting ready to go through some of the details here. Now, Some of this language is going to have to be, you may not be suitable for children. So definitely, take precautions if you need to. All right. Here's what we know. Hours after California legislator passed Senate Bill 145, an onslaught of social media posts claimed the bill would legalize pedophilia. Would legalize pedophilia in the state or allow adults to have sex with minors without being placed on the sex offender registry. All the posts are provocative and many are unsubstantiated. Several were flagged as part of Facebook's effort to combat false news and misinformation. All right. So this article that I'm reading, they focused on a Facebook post that was viewed 1.2 million times in less than 24 hours after it was published. Similar posts were viewed and shared thousands of times. And here is what was shared. Pedophilia is now legal in California. Now a 21-year-old can have sex with an 11-year-old and not be listed on the sex registry as a sex offender. This is unbelievable, California. Right. And I have an example of the post right here. Again, seen over 1.2 million times. Now, he makes kind of a reference to this law, kind of saying this is where we're headed, right? Hey, Cuties is the movie, but now this is how it's playing out in real life. The train to pedophilia has left the station. Now, maybe it has. And we're trying to look at where 2021 is going to take us. We've looked at free speech. Well, where are we headed when it comes to sexual morality? Is this the next stop? I don't know. But here's some facts that we get about SB 145, all right? SB 145, SB Senate Bill 145. Current state allows a judge to decide whether to place a young man convicted of statutory rape in which, okay, I'm not going to get too graphic here. We'll just say in which sex took place with a minor on the sex offender registry based on the facts of the case. So currently, the state allows a judge to decide whether to place a young man convicted of statutory rape in which intercourse takes place with a minor on the sex offender registry based on the facts of the case. In other words, what you could have is someone who's a certain age, who has a girlfriend, who's below the age, right? And this happens a lot of times. Okay, they both consent. There's no rape. There's no sexual assault, and they involve in a sexual act. And then the next thing you know, then the guy, someone, maybe the parents find out, and then they want him busted for statutory rape, and then all that can happen. So we could talk all day about how this should work. Depending on the state. Let's say she's 16 and you can't give. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical. Let's say she's 16, he's 18, but a girl cannot give consent until she's 17. All right. So should he go on the statutory rape list? Some will say absolutely. Some will say, well, wait a minute here. Come on, we got to think this through. And we could have a dispute all day. What I just want you to understand is what this is referencing here, okay? This is referencing to if a young man is convicted of statutory rape, then the judge can decide, like by the facts of the case, what they should do here. Like, how should we work this? Right? Are there some facts here to take into consideration here? Are there something to think about here? How should we look at this? There is no such discretion when the offenses include let's just say other sexual acts. All right, we won't go into a discussion here. All right, so there's discretion for a certain sexual act. The judge has discretion, but if the sexual act is done a different way, there is no said discretion. All right, I'm trying to be as careful as I can here. All right. SB 145 would eliminate automatic sex offender registry for young adults who are convicted of having voluntary sex in these other ways with a minor. Instead, a judge would make the decision as with cases involving the other form of sex. So there's one way of having sex that the judge can say, well, we're going to take the facts here. I'm not going to convict you as a sex offender and put you on the registry. All right. I'm not going to do that based on these facts. But if you have sex this other way, then boom, you're automatically a sex offender. End of story. And so what this does is allows the judge to determine, based on the facts of the case, which way he wants to go for all sexual acts. All right? And to try to be as vague as I can, but to help you understand, the sexual act that would typically be done between a man and a woman versus a sexual act done of people of the same sex. So therefore, this is very much trying to make it equal for people engaged in homosexual sexual act. All right, that's the best way I can try to explain this. All right. So SB 145 would eliminate automatic sex offender registry for young adults who are convicted of having voluntary sex in a different way. Instead, a judge would make the decision, as with cases involving the other way of having sex. The law would not apply in cases where one party does not believe that the act was voluntary. Now, if it's not voluntary, well, then obviously this doesn't apply. So this is not talking about something that's not voluntary. This is talking about two individuals who do so voluntarily, and whether it should be considered statutory rape. But they have to take some facts into consideration. Now, we're still got to get to, okay, what ages are we talking about here, right? Because that's still, we could probably go, oh, I don't know here. So let's continue. Now, LGBTQ advocates, including the bill's author, says it would do away with discriminatory law, one that's a relic of penal code that criminalized those acts until 1975, even between consenting adults. The distinction in the law is irrational and discriminatory towards LGBTQ youth. So the idea is heterosexual youth, the judge has the ability to say, hey, I'm not going to put you on the statutory rape list. Okay. But hey, homosexuals, you're out of luck. And so they're saying that's discriminatory. If it's allowed for the heterosexual, then it's got to be allowed for the LGBTQ youth. That's the argument. All right. Equality California and the Los Angeles District Attorney Office, all of which support the bill. SB 145 ends the irrational distinction by treating all sex the same way that the law currently treats the other type of sex. All right. I'm trying to be as vague as I can. I think you get the point. If you need me to send you this article, I can. Just email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com, and I will if I know who you are, I mean, I'm not going to send this to a child, obviously, without your parents' permission, okay? So I'll take that back. If I know who you are, I will send this to you. If I don't have a clue who you are, then I may not. All right, here we go. Let's see here. Decades ago, police used the fact that certain sex acts were illegal to raid gay clubs and charge people with crimes. They said the disparity in the law put in place during a more conservative time in California, and historically those police raids were done systematically to target folks to remove people who identified as being LGBT from our society. All right, now here's the case. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So far, we kind of get an idea what's going on, but we still need some more information here, because if this law does prove that the train has left the station and we're headed towards pedophilia, then we definitely need to understand it. But we need to make sure we take every layer of this and are very honest with it. According to this article, sex with a minor remains illegal in all cases under SB 145. Some of the claims on social media says that the bill protects rapists or lessens penalties for statutory rape. That's not the case. Nothing in the legislation would change penalties for statutory rape, which prosecutors in California can charge as either a misdemeanor or a felony. It is illegal under current law for any adult to have any type of sex with a minor, and that remains illegal under SB 145. Also, the bill does not apply to any sex offenders convicted of forcible rape. The legislation is supported by the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault and by law enforcement groups such as the California Police Chiefs Association and the California District Attorney Association. Now, remember that the social media is saying it claims that a 21-year-old can have sex with an 11-year-old. All right, here's the thing that has to be fact-checked. All right. The Facebook post says now a 21-year-old can have sex with an 11-year-old and not be listed on the sex registry as a sex offender. That's also wrong. SB 145 only applies to young people ages 14, 15, 16, or 17 and any offender within a 10-year age range. All right, so I'm assuming 14, you're 14. That means a 14-year-old could then engage in a sexual act with a 24-year-old. Now, that, like, yeah. So if and this is what they are claiming. It applies to young people ages 14, 15, 16, or 17. So 14, and any offender within a 10-year age range. Right? So we can all count it out together. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 24 and 14. Can a 14 give consent? Is this making an argument that a 14-year-old can give consent and not just give consent for one kind of sexual act, but for any kind of sexual act? And that the person, and if they give consent, then the person should not be charged with statutory rape? Like how do we work this? The vast majority of cases where a judge may decide not to put someone on the registry will be cases where the age range is close. The bill's fact sheet estimates at the end of the day, a judge will have full discretion to place someone on the registry, and a prosecutor can seek it. So the judge can put them on the sex offender list and I guess charge them with statutory rape, but they don't have to. And 14 and now 17 and 24. See, now the commentary could have gone into some more detail here about this to really help us understand what's going on. A widely shared Facebook post claimed California had legalized pedophilia and that now a 21-year-old can have sex with an 11-year-old and not be listed on the sex registry as a sex offender. That post and many like it are simply wrong. So it doesn't protect that. So it looks like 14, 15, 16, 17, and anyone 10 years older. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think if you have I think if you have a 14-year-old, well, yeah, I mean, this is probably where, I mean, obviously parents, you need to know what their 14-year-old is doing and their 15-year-old. And if they're hanging out with someone in their 20s, yeah, this raises lots of questions. So what they're claiming is that some of these post on Facebook is grossly misrepresenting what actually happens in SB 145. I would say the SB 145 has to be looked at, and it would have to be compared to what other states do. I don't know what other states do. Like what? Like in fact, let me do this. I'm just gonna check here, because we want to figure out where we're headed, but this raises all. What I want you to see is trying to look where you're headed. You got to understand where we are, and that's what you have to do. Yeah, in Texas, the age of consent is 17. Age of consent in Texas is when a person may legally consent to engage in sexual activity with another person. So it's 17 in Texas. All right, so I'm going to put age of consent in California. All right. Now it comes up easy when it comes up easy in for Texas. California, it's not. I'm trying to look here. Now that's not helpful. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to put age of consent. I'm going to remove this, because that would seem to say that it's now 14. Arkansas, it's 16. Colorado, it's 14, it looks like. It's 14 in Colorado. Okay, hang on. I'm looking at a news article here. Late Monday, just before the legislative session expired, Senate Bill 145 passed. Okay. All right, I'm looking here. What I'm trying to find is, do they give an actual age of consent? Yeah, okay. SB 145 does not apply to sex of any kind with minors who are younger than 14. So I'm assuming 14 is the age of consent now. Yeah, I'm trying to verify. It looks like that's what it's saying. So, and it looks like some other states the age of consent is 14. Now, hang on. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to look at this live on the air. Okay, I'm sorry. I went silent. Okay, I'm looking to see when it says age of consent. Okay, here we go. So the charges, okay, this deals with statutory rape. A misdemeanor if both parties are 3 or fewer years apart in age. So a misdemeanor or felony is one party is over the age of 21 and the other is under the age of 16. I don't understand the 10-year age difference then. Okay, the 14-year-old rule. You may notice that the statute, if the older party is over 21, all right, so what, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21. That's not the 10-year rule. I'm still trying to understand the 10-year rule. That's under the age of 14. All right, so, yeah. So, it looks like, though, if you're under, it looks like that 14 is the age of consent. So now we could argue the age of, if 14 is the age of consent, and is it only the age of consent with someone who's, between 50 or within a 10-year range, So this raises lots of questions, and we would need more clarification. And it could be a red flag going, oh, where are we headed here? I don't know where we're ultimately headed. I think the commentary wasn't as clear as, it offered the slippery slope argument, which is a logical fallacy there. And I apologize for me sitting there reading silently on the air. I know that's not good podcast etiquette. I apologize for that, but I'm trying to figure that one out. Because it's written so it's even in the articles trying to explain it away or trying to say, hey, this doesn't do what people claim that it does. Even in their explanation, they're not as clear as I would like. And when it's not clear, then that leaves lots of legal loopholes for who knows what to happen. And so it's something we would obviously have to watch. And that SB, I think 145 was passed recently. I think it may have been I think it was not September, maybe before September. I don't know. Maybe in August. I don't know. We'd have to go back and look. So it does raise some questions, but clearly society is changing. Now that is just a fact. There's no way to get around it. I don't know what the future holds when it comes to free speech, and I don't know what the future holds when it comes to pedophilia. I don't know. I know it's something that we have to be on the lookout for. And I think what we ultimately need to do, this is what I think we ultimately need to do, is we need to just try to figure out, obviously, what's happening in society that's making this evil act so prevalent, so prominent. And I would have to look at statistics, but it just feels like every time you turn around, it's especially for a long time when it came to Christianity, this pastor got, for some kind of, relationship with a minor, this pastor, this, sexual assault of a child, this diocese of the Catholic Church is, paying out billions of dollars because of all the cases filed against them for priests engaging, it's been rampant in society, in the church, out of the church. And that's a deeper question that we could offer. I don't even know if I could offer any insight to, but because, even inside the church. So that means there's something deep going on in society in regards to it. And we could try to figure it out. We could raise a lot of red flags, but I just, when he gave the reference to the California law, I was like, well, wait a minute there. You're not, I'm not saying he completely misrepresented it, but that was part of his argument, right? Cuties and the California law, the train has left the station, pedophilia is the next stop. And all I'm saying is when we talk about these issues, we have to try to be careful. We have to be very, and the slippery slope is a logical fallacy. It is a logical fallacy because what it does is it doesn't really look at the issue now. It just makes a hypothetical argument. Well, that's where we could end up, so this is wrong. Well, we have to deal with the current issue and make logical arguments against the current state of affairs without trying to just use the slippery slope. Slippery slope may turn out to be true, but it can't be used as an argument against something now because it's a logical fallacy. It doesn't deal with the facts now. It deals with the hypotheticals of some, future somewhere out there that hasn't happened yet. Well, you can't win an argument or a debate on hypotheticals. We got to deal with the here and now. I will argue the here and now. I think something's going on in society. Now, does Cuties, the director may have had a purpose. We could talk all day about that. Something is going on. I think we can, this is where I will say the sexual morality in society will move further and further and further and further and further and further away from biblical sexual morality. That is a fact. How is that going to affect you? How is that going to affect your church? How is it going to affect you as a parent? That is what you need to be thinking about and preparing for, just like we need to be thinking about what the future of free speech is. All right. Hopefully that was helpful. I'm still trying to figure out that SB 145. There seems to be some contradiction there. Like, okay, 14 and 10 years above. Okay, well, that's because there's some articles trying to argue, well, no, if you're over 21 and you commit a sexual act, then it's statutory automatically. But that's not the case. If the rule is 14 up to 10 years, well, that would be 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I'm counting on my fingers to make sure 21, 22, 23. You figure it out, right? 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So that would mean someone 24, is that saying that someone 14 can give consent to engage in physical relations with someone who's 24? And is that troubling? Is that a concern? It looks like other states, 14 is the age of consent. So, that raises lots of questions. But it's things we have to look at because that's where society is headed. Now, again, Christianity, we have to give. We could go all day on this subject, but it's something that we need to be aware of. All right, I'll stop right there. All right. Email me, newsif@yahoo.com, 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 newsif@yahoo.com. You know what? You never know what we're going to talk about here on the Theology Central podcast. You really don't. I think that's one thing that makes this podcast interesting. We cover literally everything, and I hope that you see. I try to be fair. I try to be very fair. I don't just come at this like, boom, the end is tomorrow. Free speech is going to be gone tomorrow. Tomorrow, pedophilia is going to rule the world. No, I'm looking at issues that we will have to address in the future, but I try to be thoughtful and try to look at it. And that can be difficult sometimes, trying to be very fair and trying to go, okay, well, what about this? And what about that? Like, I don't want to misrepresent what they did in California. At the same time, there's some things there that are kind of like, ooh, wait a minute, though. That's a little questionable. So trying to be balanced, what happens is everyone gets mad at you on every side. But someone's got to be out there trying to be balanced. Someone has to be. All right, I'll stop there. Now I'll await your feedback. All right, everyone have a great day. God bless.